But there's another thing that I want to touch on here, and that's toughness. Because that's what was on display this entire weekend. Toughness was also the product. It wasn't just football. When coaches talk to us constantly about physical and mental toughness, then they connect the two because they are connected. If you're able to hold up more physically, if it's conditioning, if you will not want to have your body shut down, that's going to make your mental toughness that much stronger because you're not going to be impacted by fatigue and then making poor mental decisions, right? All these things are talked about all the time. Go ahead, look at all of trust me on this one, all right? But coaches, for the most part, we think they're crazy. And they are to an extent because they are in pursuit of something that's unobtainable, right? They're in pursuit of this perfect game. For my job, which isn't nearly as cool, but I remember when I started off and I would screw up or I'd tease something wrong or I'd have mispronunciations or whatever, you know what I mean? Especially back then too, I was doing like some 6-hour shows and I would get so mad because I was trying to, and the guy that I was working with, I remember he was like, hey, there's no such thing as a perfect broadcast. It just isn't, it's not going to happen. So stop trying to chase it. And I was like, no, I can figure, and it was like, no, it's just not going to happen. And that's why I think coaches drive themselves crazy and sometimes drive their players crazy because you can have the most dominant win in basketball. And then you're going to be watching the film and you're like, hey, you know what? You need help earlier here. Or, you know, this, you should have boxed out there. And you're like, all right. I mean, there's never going to be a version of a football game where you're going to go through 3 hours of film, again, game time versus what real time is, but you understand the point, where you're not going to find something that could be a little bit better. And that's why these guys lose their minds, I think. And I think that's why they are wired, they are obsessed, and they're constantly disappointed because the thing that they're chasing is never actually going to happen, that perfect game. But the toughness thing is solvable to a degree. Now, a lot of it is the makeup of who your roster is. A lot of it is your leaders. A lot of it's the coaches. But, you know, toughness, even though we've looked at football over the years and there's been some eye roll stuff about how a football guy carries himself, it can feel a little Neanderthal-ish. That seems to be outdated. It seems to be uncool. But here's what's never been uncool. The tag, the baddest man in the planet, has never been thought of as like, that's an uncool thing. I wouldn't want to be the baddest man on the planet. I mean, most people probably don't think about that, but you get the point. Like it's something we love. We do deep down. If you love football, there's this part of you that does kind of love. Look at all these guys on the field taking it out at each other for 3 hours because it's a hard job. Think about being a defensive end and having 70, 80 snaps and trying to get to the quarterback. And if you don't get to him all day, it's like, hey, thanks. Or the tackle who's like, I block you 70, 80 times. You get him once and then you beat me. And it's just hard. It's frustrating. And then you're going to want to quit, right? Because I don't know how many of you, anytime you've ever done anything physical, whether it's as a laborer or just anything, just working out, right? When you're so exhausted physically and you're like, I just want to stop doing this. Most of us get to just stop. Other than the Masons out there listening and the football players we watch this weekend, you don't get to stop. You have to keep going. And those moments you're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. But you don't have that choice really in a football game. Or if you do make that choice, that means you're losing a lot of football games. You may not have a career very long. So even though football guy, whether it's a Dan Campbell at a press conference, you're like, what's this guy's deal? Or like some old school dude in his bike shorts, or Zubaz being an actual sober decision during the 90s. The football guy's different than us, but the message has always been the same. You know, think about the college coach that loses his shit in some presser, and you're like, I wouldn't trust this guy to make me toast, never mind be a leader of men. But his message about toughness was never a lie. And that's what this weekend was. Think about Joe Burrow getting his ass kicked all day against a Tennessee front that destroyed them. He got sacked 9 times. Keep fighting. Get up. Keep fighting. San Francisco had 0 offensive points. Green Bay goes right down the field. It's 7-0. It's Lambeau. It's snowy. It's Rodgers with an MVP season. He's looking for redemption off of all the bullshit over the past year. And the Niners are coming back after every punt, coming back to that sideline. And clearly they have the right dudes, whether it's Bosa or Warner or Trent Williams or Debo or Juszczyk. Take your pick. Every time the offense looks like it has no chance, their defense is holding up, and the message on the sideline is I'm sure, hey, keep fighting. Keep fighting. This is football. We still have a chance. Think about what Tampa and L.A. went through. L.A.'s up 27-3. Tampa's trying to convince themselves they're still in it. Brady's never thinking he's out, so that changes the dynamic for a team dramatically just because of his personal resume. When Brady got strip sacked by Von Miller, fumble, strip sack, Brady was on the ground and he looked done. I'm never going to say I've never seen Brady look like that, but I can't remember how often I've ever seen Brady have the look on his face that he had when the camera was in on him. He was on the ground. He took a minute to get up and he kind of looks up and it looked like a guy right there that was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But that's not Brady because Brady was going to keep fighting. And on the other side for LA, up 27-3, you blow that lead. It's 27-27, and you blew the lead to Brady. Brady's going to pull this thing out. But for a Rams team that has some pieces from a Super Bowl run, but all the doubt ready to happen for Stafford, despite the blowing of the lead having nothing to do with him at all, there had to be that message of keep fighting. And think about last night. How many other teams, how many other quarterbacks would have thought, this guy that I'm going up against, how many other teams would have deep down had a moment where like, we lost this game? And that's what they did. Both sides, they kept fighting, and who knows? If there was no sudden death, we might still be here. I think it's just an important reminder because there's always the eye roll for the Dan Campbell type that just keeps hammering the basics of toughness, physical, imposing your will, all that stuff that, again, seems to feel a little outdated. But it's never been a lie. These coaches have always been telling us the truth because that's what this weekend and what football's always been about.